everybody. I wasn't expecting such a full room. It's nice to see so many people here. So welcome to the eBay Open and welcome to our session on brand protection, intellectual property and the eBay Verified Rights Owner Programme. My name is Debbie. I am absolutely thrilled to be leading this session today. I've been with eBay for 6 years. I am a policy expert and a growth advisor. So as a policy expert, I'm really passionate about removing counterfeits from site and having it as a safe trading platform for everybody. But as a growth advisor, I'm also really passionate about helping our sellers to grow and scale their businesses on eBay and make sure that they have all of the knowledge and the tools that they might need for success. So during this presentation, what we're going to look at is the eBay Verified Rights Owner Programme, aka the VeRO program. Anyone who's been selling with eBay for a little while will know that we love an acronym. So Verified Rights Owner becomes VeRO, significantly not as described becomes SNAD. We love a good acronym. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the ins and outs of this program and what it means for you as a seller. And hopefully you will walk away from this session with a little bit more knowledge of how the program works and what you need to do if you ever encounter a report from a rights owner. We are running a little bit behind schedule, but we should have plenty of time anyway. So first up, what are we actually talking about when we talk about intellectual property? So intellectual property, the definition is it's something that comes from original creative thought. So if you create a design for a dress, you can register that as your design. If you think up like an invention or like a kid's toy, you might register that patent or that design. It doesn't mean now that you own every physical copy of that kid's toy. You're not going into people's houses on Christmas morning and taking their toys, but it does mean that you own the idea for that. That also then gives you license on how that design can then be replicated in the future or how it can be infringed on or not infringed on. Important to note, if you are a creator of intellectual property, please do make sure that you register it. And this doesn't just apply to eBay, this just means like in general. You can do so, if you pop it into Google, it's via the gov.uk website, and make sure that you register it. Some of you might be planning to build a brand out of your eBay, so you might have like a name that you're using as your eBay user ID. You might want to register that as your trademark brand. Now, most sellers that I work with wouldn't class themselves as intellectual property owners. Most sellers that I work with don't create things, they don't make things, they just sell things. However, they do take their own photos for their eBay listings. You might be wondering, are photos intellectual property? Let's park that idea because that's something that we are going to touch on later. Intellectual property is literally everywhere. So regardless of what you're selling on eBay, branded clothing, beauty products, furniture, it is literally everywhere. So let's have a look at the VeRO program and how that relates to you as a seller. So what exactly is the VeRO program? So the VeRO program is it's a dedicated pathway that we have for intellectual property and brand owners. It was launched 25 years ago, so it's been around for a really long time. So what this does is this allows intellectual property owners and brand owners to contact eBay directly if they spot violations of their intellectual property and ultimately to find a resolution. It's not always about having the listings removed from site. In some cases, it could just be a case maybe that a brand name is being used incorrectly. So it's not that the item needs to come down, it just means that you can't use the brand name in that listing. So let's have a look at the types of intellectual property violations that are reported through VeRO. I'm going to explain each one and try and give examples so that it's nice and clear. I'm going to break them into two categories. We have what we call fixable and non-fixable. So when we talk about fixable, this means that it's something in the listing that needs to be changed. So it's not the item that's the problem, it's the way you've listed it. So let's say, for example, my shoes. If I was to list these, I might be inclined to describe these as Chanel style shoes. They're certainly not Chanel, they're from Primark. But if I was to try and list them on eBay, I might want to try and describe them as Chanel style. And you can't do that because they're not Chanel. So it's not that I can't sell the shoes, I just can't use Chanel to describe it. Similar with logo misuse. You'll see sometimes if sellers are listing a branded product. So let's say if I was listing this polo shirt, I could list that and then they'll use like the logo. They'll take like a picture of the brand logo off like Google Images and they'll upload that as an image. And that could be considered logo misuse. It is up to the rights owner if they don't want their logo used in that way. So it's not something that eBay are going to take action on unless we get a notification from the rights owner. Another thing that we call a fixable violation is parallel import. It's also referred to as grey importing. So what that means is the product that you are listing is genuine, but it's not licensed to be sold in the region that you have listed it in. So I've seen it a lot with beauty products in the past. There might be a certain moisturizer and it might have been manufactured for sale on the Asian market. And then a seller might have somehow got like a batch of them and they're selling them in the UK. So it's not that they can't sell them at all, they just can't sell them in the UK because they're only licensed to be sold on the Asian market. I hope that makes sense. So these are the ones that are fixable. This is an example of something where it's not the product that's the issue, it's just something in the listing that needs to be changed. Then we have what we call non-fixable. So non-fixable would be things like counterfeit. So counterfeit being like an unauthorized replica of a product. You see that a lot with clothing. You see it with software sometimes as well. We'll also see things like patent and design infringement. So they can kind of overlap, I suppose, a little bit with counterfeit and replica. You know, that they can be kind of similar. So that would be that you have maybe manufactured a product that is already patented by someone else. So these are examples of where it's the item itself that's infringing. So that's what we consider to be non-fixable. Does that make sense? I hope. So how exactly does the VeRO program work and who can report to us? So anyone who is a rights owner can report to us and they can do so at any time when they want. Now bear in mind they can only report violations of their own intellectual property. Just because you're an IP owner, it doesn't mean you can report for somebody else, but it means that you can report to us for your own intellectual property, or you can authorize somebody else to do that as well. A lot of the really big brands hire like companies like brand protection companies, and their job is basically to scour sites like eBay and other e-commerce platforms and report listings that they believe to be infringing. It's up to them how often they do this. Some brands are really, really proactive and they like to do it daily. You could list an item this morning and it could be reported by the evening. Some brands are maybe less proactive. They might only do it every couple of weeks or every couple of months. Totally up to them when they do it. Now I mentioned earlier about photos or images being intellectual property. I want to touch on this one because this is probably the most common one that pops up with sellers that I work with. If I can get a show of hands, who sells on other platforms as well as eBay? Now this isn't a test, you're not getting kicked out. There we go. So when you sign up for eBay, there's a little clause in the user agreement that says that if you upload a photo to eBay, that it's free to be used by anyone else on eBay. So that's basically an eBay policy. Now where there's kind of a little bit of a loophole behind this, if you are selling on other platforms, chances are you use the same photos for like all of the platforms that you sell on. You're probably not taking different ones. So because that photo is hosted elsewhere, in theory, if you were to spot, like let's say you go on, you've taken this amazing photo of an item on eBay, you go on a couple of weeks later to check where you're ranking in best match and you see that another seller has used your photo. Chances are they've taken it from your eBay listing. However, if it's listed on any of your other platforms, wherever you're selling, you could submit a VeRO claim to us and you could give your other website location as the source of where that image might be taken from. Even though we know it probably was taken from eBay, we can't prove it. We don't actually know where it's taken from. So provided that the photo is pretty much hosted anywhere else outside of eBay, that would be a valid VeRO claim. So that's something that might kind of pop up. If it hasn't popped up for you recently, it might be something that pops up in the future if you're concerned about people using your photos. Oh, sorry, I was staring at a bright light there. Let me see. So, how do you actually submit a report if you are an intellectual property owner? You're probably wondering, why is there pasta behind me? So, what you do is you submit what's called a Notice of Claimed Infringements form, or an NOCI, or a NOCI form. So, and that basically looks like this form here. So what this basically contains all of the information. So this is essentially a legal document. So you fill this in with the information of who you are, what your trademark is, what it is that you're reporting for, and it's signed and dated. And you're basically declaring under penalty of perjury that you don't authorize this violation or whatever it is. As I said, you will need to provide kind of proof. So if it's, let's say, we'll use images for example, if you've got your other website, you would need to pop in the links for where the images came from. That gets sent to our VeRO team and the claim is generally processed within 72 hours. So it's a really quick turnaround for VeRO. Now in some cases, because bear in mind, it is a verified rights owner program, so we have to make sure that everybody who's reporting through this is the rights owner. In some cases you might be asked for more information. So let's say, for example, if you forgot to provide the links of the photos, we might come back to you and say, listen, we need to see where these are coming from. Or it might be a case that the claim is rejected completely. If you have no evidence that, that you are that rights owner, or if it's not considered valid, the claim may be rejected. So that's how you report as a rights owner, but I don't know for everybody in the room, you might not be rights owners. You might be wondering how this is going to affect you as a seller. So what happens then if you're a seller and somebody reports you for violating their intellectual property? You receive communication from eBay, and it will go directly into your eBay messages. It will say what exactly the violation is. So it will outline, have you been reported for brand name misuse? So is it something that's fixable? Is it something like logo misuse? Or is it something maybe like counterfeit or patent infringement that we consider non-fixable? So that's the what. It will also tell you the who. So it will tell you who has reported you. So it will give you their name and it will give you their contact details. There will always be a way to reach out to the person that's reported you, because understandably, if you want to dispute this, you're going to need to know who they are. You will also be told how you need to proceed. Now can I actually get a show of hands? Has anyone had a VeRO report? Like, has anyone been reported by somebody? Okay, so this might be something that will be interesting, I think, to people. So the process that we have followed for quite some years is you would generally be provided with the pathway of how you need to proceed. So in some cases, it might be a case that you have 48 hours to change the listing, or it might be a case that the listing has come down. We are always striving to make the platform a little bit more user-friendly, and we do take on feedback from sellers. There's going to be a session later on with Nikki Blackie about some regulatory changes that are going on, and there's going to be a new process for VeRO, which is going to benefit all sellers. That means, let's say, for example, if you were reported for selling an unauthorized copy of something, rather than eBay ending your listing and taking all of that sales history, your listing is basically going to be temporarily hidden. So it's still there, it's still active kind of technically in the background with that sales history. If you manage to find a resolution then with the rights owner and they retract their claim, your listing goes live again and your sales history is there. It's kept. Now, I think that is huge news, because that's been, I know that's been a pain point for sellers, that your listing gets taken down. You might have sold 1,000 and then you might come to a resolution, but the new listing goes up with no sales history. So this is absolutely huge, but that's coming later on in the year. At the moment, the process, the way it works, is you would still be told how you need to proceed. So letting you know if you can or can't relist this product. Really important to know that if you are using a third-party tool or an API, do make sure that you maybe don't have some sort of an automatic relist feature turned on for now, because what happens is if you have a listing and let's say it's reported as infringing on a patent, if that comes down, your third-party tool might be inclined to go, oh, we need to list that again, and it will put it back up. And then that could lead to another violation because the item has gone straight back up. So that's kind of not what you'd want to do. A big question, I suppose, that most of you have is, well, what if you don't agree with the report? You've been reported, say, for selling counterfeits, and you're going, nah, like, I'm not selling counterfeits. So you will be, as we mentioned, you will be given the who section, so who's reported you and how to contact them. First port of call should always be to reach out to the rights owner. Try and get a little bit more information from them. Some rights owners are more responsive than others. That's kind of a little bit of a pain point. Sometimes they don't always reply straight away. Don't be afraid to go back to them again and again. I would say be a little bit of a pest if you need to be, if they're not responding to you. If they haven't responded to you after 5 business days, you can contact eBay and let us know. We will then reach out to them and let them know, like, listen, seller 123 is trying to get in touch with you about this particular report. We'll give them a little nudge. Unfortunately, we can't drag a reply out of them, but sometimes it's all we need to kind of get them over the line. But yeah, first port of call, always reach out to the rights owner to see if there's a way of resolving the claim. In some cases with rights owners, if they've reported you, say, for selling counterfeits, it might be because they don't recognise you as someone that they supply to. But then you might go back to them and say, oh, well, I buy from such and such a supplier. And then they might go, oh, okay, fine. So it could sometimes be as simple as that. Now, when I speak with sellers about the VeRO program, one of the kind of main things they ask me is, well, I don't like this. I don't want to get reported. How can I stop myself ever getting reported? Short answer, you can't, unless you study intellectual property and you know every single piece of intellectual property in the entire world, which is absolutely not feasible. But there are certain steps that you can take to make sure that you can minimise the risk of being reported. You can't stop it completely, but there's a couple of tips that we can follow. The first one, and I would say probably the easiest one, is always create your own listing content. So take your own images, write your own descriptions. I mentioned earlier that there is the policy about using other photos on eBay. If they're in the eBay catalogue, absolutely work away and use them. If they're another seller's photos, even though it does technically say that they're there to be used, you don't know that that seller isn't selling on another platform. They might be hosted elsewhere. So similar to the loophole that I said, you want to make sure you don't get caught with that loophole. So easiest I say is either use the catalogue or take your own photos. Be really careful with brand names. This is something we see a lot, that there's a lot of common kind of brand names that people, they're words that are used but that are actually brand names. That sticky fabric one is the one, am I allowed to say? Velcro. Yeah, I'm hoping I don't get slapped with a VeRO report now. So Velcro, that like it was only when I started working VeRO that I learned that that's a brand name. I just thought that's like the name for that sticky fabric. But they're very specific about how their brand name is used. So not all sticky fabric is Velcro. Similar to Harrington jackets, you know, those bomber jackets that have like the tartan on the inside of them. Harrington is a brand, so you'll get like other retailers that will manufacture a jacket in that style, and you might be then inclined to list it and call it a super dry Harrington jacket, but it's different because it's that style, you know what I mean? Jacuzzi's another one, and like Post-it, like there's loads of them, they're everywhere. So kind of have a think about it. If you are going to list something and you're thinking on using something, say if I was to describe, I go to my hairdresser and I say I want to look like Barbie, which is fine, but if I'm putting that in a listing, think about it and think, is that word trademarked? If it's a brand, it probably is. Another kind of piece of advice that I do feel comes with some caveats is to review the VeRO participant pages. So if you go to the VeRO section on eBay, we have a list of all the big brands who report through VeRO, and it's done in alphabetical order, and there's a lot of them. Now, while that's really, really good advice, what that doesn't take into account is smaller IP owners. So somebody who might have registered a design, they might have made like a small invention, so they might not be a big brand, but you know, there's still a chance that you could be infringing on their intellectual property. They're not going to be on that list. So it is great advice, but you know, don't take it as gospel that just because you've read that list. Also, don't think that just because someone's not on the list, you can infringe on their rights, because anyone can register with us. So even if we've got a big brand that's not on that list, they could register with us later today. So it's you know, it is good advice, but don't take it as a kind of a fix-all for everything. After that, I suppose I would say, like, know your products and where they're coming from. Like, have a good relationship with your supplier. Like, make sure you trust them, that they're supplying you with genuine products and goods that are okay to be sold in that region. So we mentioned earlier about parallel import. You could get a big batch of stock and it might be genuine, but it might not be okay to sell in the UK. Now, if you're doing cross-border trade, that might not be too much of an issue for you, because you might still be able to sell it into America or Australia. But if you're only selling within the UK and that product can't be sold in the UK, it isn't really much good to you then after that. If you've not been taking notes, don't worry. There's access, if anyone wants to scan this QR code, that will give you resources. But you can also go to the, I'll get out of the way so I'm not, my head is in everyone's way. If you go to the eBay website, at the very, very bottom of the page where we've got links to like resources, the user agreement, all of that kind of stuff, there is a section for VeRO and you can view that at any time. So I want to circle back. I mentioned the idea of brand name misuse. This is a really, really common one that comes up on site. And one thing that I think is really important to kind of note about this is it's not that you can't sell the item, and it's always not even that you can't use the brand name at all. I'm going to give an example here. I brought props, visual aids. So, smartphone, for example. So anyone can manufacture a cover. So I've got this ridiculous one with a string on it, because I always drop it. So anyone can make a cover for a smartphone. There's no rule to say that you can't do that. It's not that it's like patented or anything. The phone obviously is, but anyone, you'll see generic covers on site all the time. Where it gets a little bit tricky is this is an Apple iPhone 14, I think, and this is a cover for it. But this cannot be listed as an Apple iPhone 14 cover. It has to be listed as a cover for an Apple iPhone 14. Now, what's the difference? Like, it is pretty much the same wording. The issue is when you're putting the brand name at the start of the listing, the implication is that it's made by that brand, and Apple don't like that. So if I was to list this as an Apple iPhone 14 cover, I'd probably get reported through VeRO. But if I list it as a cover for an iPhone 14, it's probably fine. You see it a lot with car parts as well. If you are manufacturing like kind of generic parts for, like seat covers, for example. So you might make seat covers and they might fit a Nissan Micra, but you can't list them as Nissan Micra seat covers. They have to be seat covers for a Nissan Micra. It might sound really, really silly if you've never heard this before. It is such a minute detail, but that can be the difference in your listing being reported and not being reported. Another thing that I think is really important to note when you're selling on eBay, we're selling kind of on all e-commerce platforms, have a good knowledge of the categories that you're selling in. The reason I'm bringing this up is because a lot of non-branded goods can be like inspired by branded goods, like I'm using my shoes as another example. You see it a lot in fashion. You've got that sports brand that has the 3 stripes. You've got those shoes that have the red sole. You've got that other designer brand that has like green and red stripes. You know, there's trademark kind of everywhere. And if you're not really familiar with that category, you might have a product and you might not actually know that it's inspired by another product and therefore potentially infringing on another product. So it can be an easy mistake to make. I've got some other props. I used to be a teacher, so I find the visual aids are really, really helpful. These are 2 items that I was able to find in my house that just look like regular everyday items. Has anyone seen this octopus before that you turn inside out? You've probably got kids that have it. These were all over TikTok a couple of years ago. So somebody obviously invented this, they came up with this design and it went viral, it was everywhere. What happened was then obviously somebody made copies of it. I was in Portugal a couple of months ago and they were like everywhere. Every single shop on the street had them outside, selling them for like €4 or €5. So you could be, let's say if you're selling toys, or even if you're not selling toys, if you sell kind of lots of different bits and bobs, you could get a batch of these from a supplier and you don't know that they're infringing on a product. This is a dog toy. It's got a smiley face on it. So if I was to list this on eBay, I might be inclined to list this as smiley face ball. The word smiley is trademarked. Somebody has trademarked the word smiley. Same with rainbow. Now that doesn't mean that they own the rights to it completely, that no one can ever use it, but it's in relation to certain products. So the reason I wanted to show these 2 items is because I just wanted to show kind of how easy it is to, you know, not know about these things. You know, you're not expected to be an expert in everything, but it is a good idea to have like a knowledge of the products that you're selling and the industry that you're selling in, because you might be able to spot these things a little bit better. I'm just going to pop these down so I'm not holding them for the rest of the presentation. Now, you're probably wondering now, like, what's the benefit of the VeRO program? Because this sounds like, you know, a lot of information and a lot of things for you to be aware of as a seller. So why would we actually want the VeRO program in place? Like, what's the benefit of it? Mainly because we want eBay to be a trusted marketplace. We want it to be a safe platform for everyone who uses it. So obviously for our buyers, we want to make sure that our buyers are coming on site and that they're buying genuine products, or they're not being missold products, you know, with the brand name, you know, where it shouldn't be. We want to make sure that they're having a good experience on site. If buyers don't have a good experience on site, that means that they leave, they don't come back. And that's obviously not what we want. So we want to make sure that buyers trust us. We want to also have like a good platform for sellers. The worst case scenario, or the best case scenario from VeRO reports for a seller is if you get repeated reports, and this is the best case scenario, is you can be restricted from selling a couple of days. The worst case scenario is you could be taken to court, and eBay could be taken to court. And we absolutely don't want that either. So we need to make sure that everybody is compliant and doing what they're supposed to do. We also want brands to trust us. eBay's been around for like nearly 30 years. We've evolved so much as from like the C2C marketplace that we once were, but a lot of people still don't know that eBay is a place for brands. I've worked for eBay for 6 years and my mom actually still doesn't know what I do as a job, because she thinks eBay is, and I quote, stuff where people sell stuff from their attic, or a site where people sell stuff from their attic. That was a mouthful. So like she doesn't actually know what I do as a job, because she doesn't know that eBay is a place for brands. Now bear in mind as well, the concept of the VeRO program is not just exclusive to eBay. Most other e-commerce platforms have a similar route where IP owners and brand owners can report directly and have content removed if it's infringing. If you stick a video on YouTube and you use like a song in the background that you don't have permission to use, chances are the rights owner to that song or the artist will report to YouTube and possibly get your video taken down. So it is pretty much kind of the idea of it is sort of everywhere. So just to circle back, anyone who is an intellectual property owner can report to us, and they can do so basically as and when they choose. So you might have found in the past, if you've had a VeRO report, it might have been something that you listed maybe 6 months ago. It might have even sold, and then you're kind of wondering, why is it only being reported now? So it is completely up to rights owners kind of when they report. If they do want to report, they have to submit a notice of claimed infringement. And if anyone in this room, if this is something that's going to apply to you, if you're going to be submitting notices of claimed infringement, you need to do this whenever there is a new intellectual property violation. Some sellers will come to us and they'll say, oh, well, you know, I reported this person, you know, last week, you know, can you not just take this listing down? Because the listing ID is going to be different and the date is going to be different, every violation basically needs a new notice of claimed infringement form. Now some of you might be wondering, like, how do you report someone if you're not an intellectual property owner? Because we have other, you might be spotting violations on the site, you might be spotting counterfeits, you know, you might be spotting something that isn't as it should be, and you might want to report to that to us. So we have a back office team, like a proactive sweeps team we call them, and they'll seek out things like counterfeits and prohibited items, anything that's not supposed to be there. They do that in the background. We do also have a reactive procedure for anyone who does want to report. Does anyone sell coins or stamps? Yes. So I went to Stampex last year in London. Really, really interesting convention, and I met like a lot of like kind of really kind of passionate and kind of some slightly eccentric people. It was really, really fun. But what I learned about people who sell in that category is they feel really, really passionately about counterfeits in like the stamp community. And this is where we rely on member reports, because if I'm to review a listing, I'm probably going to be good at spotting like a fake Louis Vuitton bag. I'm not going to be so good at spotting a limited edition Queen Elizabeth stamp from, you know, 19 whatever. You know, this is where we rely on member expertise. Now do bear in mind, anyone with an eBay report can use this feature. So in some cases it is open to abuse. So not every report is going to result in the listing getting taken down. We are going to take into account the listing itself, the seller's feedback, all sorts of other criteria are taken into account then as well. I suppose one of the kind of last points, if you think that the rights owner has made a mistake, contact them. Make sure that you contact them. And then to kind of just to wrap up, what happens if you are on the receiving end of multiple VeRO reports? And I wanted to keep this to the end because this is so important. While it doesn't affect your seller performance, so your service metrics or your seller level or anything like that, VeRO reports don't affect that. If you are concerned about your seller metrics and stuff, there's a great talk coming up next, but that's not something that's going to impact it. It can eventually result in your account being restricted from selling. So temporarily we might block your listings for 3 days. If it goes on, maybe if it keeps happening again, it might get up to 7, it might get up to 10. The more violations build up. And that's obviously something that we don't want. So make sure you're paying attention to your eBay messages, because if there's a VeRO violation, that's where it's going to come in. So if you've got a large team, if you've got somebody else who's manning your inbox, make sure that they know to look out for these types of violations so that they can flag them to you. And again, make sure that your API isn't going to be relisting them, because that can lead to repeat violations again, and that's absolutely not what we want. If you do want to learn more about the Verified Rights Owner Programme and you didn't scan the QR code, plenty of resources available on the website. There is also a short video tutorial as well. If you're a bit more of a kind of a visual learner, you might find that a little bit easier. There's QR codes here. I'll get out of people's way if people want to scan them. Thank you so much for your time today. Really, really appreciate it. We don't really have time for questions now at the moment, but I am going to be floating around. You can try and book in one-to-ones with the marketplace advisors as well, but if anyone does want to speak to me on an individual basis, I will do my best to chat to you. Thank you so much.